Hello and welcome to the Football Diary podcast. And January is coming to an end, but the window hasn't quite. We recorded just before deadline day with plenty of unanswered questions still. But some people are answering quite firm questions like, how good are Nottingham Forest after that 5-0 loss to Bournemouth? Well, I think they answered that emphatically this weekend with a 7-0 win over Brighton. Incredible there. So we'll be focusing on that first, of course. Arsenal answered some of their critics as well. A 5-1 win over Man City. Was it a case of Arsenal have found their level and they really are this impressive now? Or did Man City kind of gift them a bit of an easier fixture than they anticipated? We also asked the question of whether Villa can actually come back from a Champions League game and perform in the league. Well, maybe Marcus Rashford can help them do that. We'll have a look at some of their transfer business and the best of the rest, as always. And to unpick all of that with me is Dave. Hey, mate. How are you?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. And I spared you a little mention of Man United's 2-0 loss to Crystal Palace in the intro.
Spared any mention of our riveting transfer activity as well.
Hey, listen, you got a new left-back in. I need a defender at my club, so we'll talk about that later, I'm sure. But let's start with a club that seemed to have everything that they need on the pitch. And, I mean, I mentioned it a second ago, didn't I? We wondered how Forest were going to bounce back after that loss last week. They told us quite firmly how they were going to do that. They were going to do that by smashing goals in at every opportunity. An incredible win over Brighton, 7-0. They did not give up. They were relentless in this game, weren't they, Dave?
Well, yeah, I mean, we were thinking, they've got to do some recovering for that 5-0 obviously loss to Bournemouth and help their goal difference a little bit more. So I don't think we anticipated to be, obviously gain 2 goals on obviously that previous game, but I thought they were outstanding. I think particularly you look at some of the players who've come out, the likes of Danilo. We're talking about him before this game, but I thought he epitomised everything their performance was about. He was energetic. I thought his aggression in the tackle. I just think they couldn't deal with 2 or 3 of their players in particular. I thought him and Elanga were absolutely outstanding. They couldn't deal with Elanga's pace and his drive and down that right hand side, and I just thought he's more than made up for Callum Hudson-Odoi's absence, particularly in these last couple of games. I think even against Bournemouth, he looked like their most threatening player, but it was a thorn in Brighton's side all game, and really kind of his contribution. You saw, he had some great link-up play with Chris Wood, and obviously gave him a couple of goals. So you can't argue with the business, and I think you're looking at that fee that they paid for Elanga now. Looks like nothing, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm hopeful that signing wingers from Manchester United that turns out to be a consistently good thing. We saw an Anthony man of the match for Real Betis, and Elanga getting a hat-trick of assists in this game as well. We'll see what that means for my boys. But no, that front line, Dave, I mean, Chris Wood gets a hat-trick there as well. So he's on 17 Premier League goals for the season. And Gibbs White behind him. He's just a sensational footballer, isn't he? He just seems to be reaching new levels every week. I mean, the way he controlled play, the way he dictated the game for Forest, his creativity, his flair. I mean, the ball across the pitch for Nico Williams when he hits the post, you just see that Gibbs White is up for anything at the moment. And there's a confidence flowing through a side that are coming off the back of that heaviest defeat of the season. And yet they were up for this game so much. They were so clinical, weren't they? So is it just a case now, Dave, of keeping what they've got? Because the January window is coming to an end and it's been relatively quiet for Forest, actually. I think we anticipated a couple of players coming in, but is there, I don't know, the kind of resurgence of Elanga's form and Danilo coming back into the side enough to keep this Forest side going for a push for Europe now? Do they not necessarily need to dip into the market?
I think there's probably, with obviously Danilo's recovering and coming back into midfield, they've obviously felt that's enough to let Ward-Prowse obviously return to West Ham. I think whether we see something in midfield extra, obviously they're still awaiting Sangare to return as well, aren't they? So whether we see anything there, we did mention about a new striker, didn't we? Because we don't know. Obviously, Awoniyi came on in this game, but still, whether something obviously happens to Chris Wood, then would they all of a sudden that massively affect their goal tally? I mean, with the form that he's in at the minute, anyone coming in to replace him will do exceptionally well. So let's be honest. I think their squad, like before the start of the season, if you said how strong is their squad, I don't think you'd have said probably. Looking at it now, I think you've got to say they've got some good strength in depth. And the additions that they've made, obviously, we highlighted defence, didn't we? But look at their defensive season; it's come on like tremendously well with the addition of Milenkovic. I think Ein has been. He's definitely probably been the best right back for me this season.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to be admired with what he's got, and the improvement that they've made is out of this world. And it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't bring anybody in, because I think there's players there that are more than willing to make the jump into those positions. Maybe if they're not their normal positions, but to do a job for the team, you can see that that's definitely the case.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be admired there, Dave, that we talk about the attacking display of this game and the fact that they went on to score 7 in such an emphatic win, but you consider the defensive performance as well, because Brighton had opportunities in this game. I mean, they had 10 shots at goal, but Matt Sells was back to electric form again. I think they'll have all been disappointed with the Bournemouth game and shipping 5 goals, but actually Sells played his part in this win. I know it sounds odd to say that the goalkeeper played well in a 7-0 win, but that showed collectively how up for it they were. And I think defensively, again, they brought in a bit more solidity at the back. They moved back to a back 3 as well. And that really seemed to work. And then it meant that they were able to pack numbers into that midfield as well, where Brighton looked really vulnerable. They basically had one midfielder trying to compete against the Forest side that will easily play their way around you in quick transitions. It was a really odd decision for Brighton, but Forest capitalised. In terms of Brighton, Dave, anything to worry about because of this result? They've been really inconsistent this year, haven't they? I mean, they're 10th, which feels about perfect for what you see on the pitch from, because one week they could be great, one week they could be terrible. So middle of the road seems like the right sort of thing, but that's not really where their ambitions lie, is it? So what do you think of Brighton this season? Is there any kind of conversation to be had there?
I think up until a couple of weeks ago, I think we were saying about how well they were doing. I think they are capable of a bit of naivety. I think that we forget how young the team is in general as well. I think the setup wasn't quite right, if I'm being honest, for this game. And you saw him make changes at half time. To be honest, they did look a little bit more settled until Forest kind of got out of sight. But they did have a couple of moments. I mean, Danny Welbeck had that chance anyway, hit the bar, and if that went in, I think that was 2-0, might be 3-0, I'm not too sure. Then momentum could have swung, but I just thought the way that Forest actually managed the game, I thought they didn't really give them a lot to kind of get encouraged by, But yeah, this is like I say, Brighton is such a young team with a lot of young talent. But also, they're happy for other teams to take their talent off of them and develop them further. Obviously, Julian Cisse has gone out to Ipswich on loan, hasn't he? And Evan Ferguson's obviously just gone to West Ham as well on loan as well. So, and they're clever with their squad. They give them all plenty of minutes, and this is a team that have done really well over the last few seasons. I think. Let's be honest, they've got quite a few experienced heads in there as well, like the likes of Danny Welbeck, who will definitely steady the ship, I think, for them at times in the season. But again, like you say, they're under obviously the guide of a new coach as well, who's, let's be honest, he's got little experience at the very, very top level. I'm sure he's learning along the way as well. So I think with the season that's with this kind of stability will do them well, and obviously they'll reassess in the summer, won't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Another team that will be looking to what they can do in the summer to strengthen after a quiet January will be coming off the back of an excellent result, Dave, that you hope is not in vain for their kind of push for the title this year in some ways. Arsenal 5, Man City 1. And I think it's really easy to caveat any results against Man City at the moment by saying, oh yeah, but this Man City team aren't in the best of form. But give Arsenal their credit. They tore them apart in this game, didn't they, Dave? So 5-1 win, 5 different goal scorers. I think an all-round excellent performance. And one thing you would always say about Arsenal is you need them to play the game, not the occasion. And it seemed like they were really riled up for this City game after the earlier game in the season. They felt like there was injustice with the red card. Haaland was on the wind up. They conceded a late equaliser. They were out for revenge in this one. And a lot of the times in the past, you've seen Arsenal with a kind of narrative around them really struggle to keep their head in the game. Well, it was very firmly in this game, wasn't it? They had a really mature, excellent, well-controlled performance, didn't they?
Yeah, and I mean, I think you're right. I do wonder if it tells us more about Arsenal's title challenge credentials or whether it's more about how City have fallen, particularly how their approach to the game has changed so much, I think, over the last, particularly this last 12 months, and their confidence is, it's been smashed at times during this season. But I thought Arsenal in this game, they definitely set them traps for them, and we saw it in the opening minutes, didn't we? I think their energy, particularly in that front line, I think that was probably one of Arsenal's most complete performances, and I think every player on that pitch for them, did them so proud. Really, I thought Kai Havertz, that was one of his best games, although missed a very easy chance to make it 2-0, and you don't know if that doesn't go in, and then if that goes in, it probably makes it a lot easier that first half. But I just think at the moment you're getting a lot of people coming out and criticising, I think, their dealings in the transfer window, saying they need a striker, etc. I mean, fair play to Arteta. If he thinks that that's not what they need, and what they've got is more than enough to give them enough in attack and score goals, then. And they've shown it in this game. There's obviously players like Trossard and Martinelli who both had really effective games, who can contribute. And I just feel as though, although it might not be enough to pip Liverpool to the title, because let's be honest, it doesn't look like Liverpool are having any banana. But every banana skin that's thrown at them at the moment is, they pass with flying colours, unfortunately. Yeah. But I just think that it was a game that in the past, I think, particularly against a Man City team, it probably would have been a little bit more difficult for them. But like you say, with how City have performed, particularly over the last few months, it was probably perfect for them. It was set up perfectly for them.
I think there's a few players as well that really took that to heart as well, and knew that there was a fragility to Man City, and thought if they presented that energy they could get at them. I thought it was Declan Rice's best game in a really long time as well. I thought he was superb. I mean, he got 2 assists, but actually everything he did just showed his work rate, and I think quite often he was the driving force between getting Arsenal up the pitch quickly. He's really good at that. It's quite underrated, actually. I think reputation-wise, we often think of him as quite a deep midfielder, but the way he can transition the ball by just carrying it forward, and the kind of pressure he puts on other teams, makes him a really effective part of the attack as well, because he defends from the front. And we saw that in this game. I thought he was excellent at that. And I really thought Myles Lewis-Skelly, he looked fantastic. Now, you've got there a young man playing out of position and showing what he's capable of in one of the biggest fixtures in their season, really. And it's always difficult, isn't it, Dave, when a young English player comes through, not to overhype them, not to kind of rush their career trajectory ahead. But on current form, I mean, Tuchel's got to be looking at him as England's left-back for a bit, surely. The maturity he showed, as well as Ethan Nwaneri, who comes on and scores a fantastic goal. The young players at Arsenal, are they kind of filling the gaps that the transfer market has missed?
Yeah, and it's something I think people have been critical of with Arteta, and said, he doesn't give young players an opportunity. You look at Aidan Heaven, who's obviously gone to United. Chido Obi Martin has gone to United, two of their biggest talents over the last, couple of years. And he's shown that he's prepared to give them an opportunity. And I think he's been put in a position where, he's had to, really, because obviously the absence of, Gabriel Jesus and Saka, particularly in those attacking areas. He's not been given a choice. But I do feel, though, Myles Skelly's probably got to be their success of the story of the season, hasn't he, really? Because I think he's come from little to no experience, with professional football. I think he's just taken it so well and seamlessly, really, to be honest. Like you say, he'll definitely be touted, I think, for an England call-up. and one I'm sure that Thomas Tuchel will be looking at.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you say when you say it might be a necessity thing to be calling these players into the Arsenal team, but to give him some credit, I mean, look at their bench this weekend. Tierney and Calafiori all on the bench who can play left back. And they're playing Lewis Skelly out of position there instead. And he proved why, I thought. He really has something about him, Dave. I think his ability on the ball is really, really apparent. I think he's really calm. I think he knows the game very well for such a young player. And actually, we saw a couple of times, he's quite strong for such a small lad as well. Like, he must have Haaland off the ball a couple of times and really dealt with any defensive concerns. So do you see him as Arsenal's kind of permanent left back now, or do you think maybe there's a different role in the team? Because traditionally, he's more of like a left-sided midfielder or a DM based on his youth career anyway.
I think he'll get an opportunity there. I think it'll be unfair, really, if he didn't get an opportunity in his preferred position. Although I think at the minute, and especially with his youth, he'll just be happy to be playing, because getting minutes at that age, at such a high level, doing the world of good. But also, I think it shows his level of maturity. And like you mentioned there, I think one of the things that impresses me most is his composure. Like on the ball, I think he looks so relaxed. When he's in possession, he never looks, panicked at all, which is, the sign of like a real mature, talented player who's kind of beyond his years, really. So. A lot of people, actually, I've seen a few people comparing it to Mainu when he first came into United. And I can see similarities in a way. Obviously, very different kinds of players, but I think just the way they play their football, very calm on the ball. They're always looking to take care of the ball and recycle possession. And I've been really impressed with him. And it's no surprise to see the likes of those names on the bench when you see how he's come in and performed. He just deserves it, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Arsenal will take so much heart from this performance. A penny for Erling Haaland's thoughts. Obviously, the narrative was all about him. The stay humble comments. I mean, so we had Gabriel celebrating the first goal in Haaland's face after Haaland threw the ball at him in the last game. Lewis Skelly doing Haaland's celebration, which I thought was fantastic, after Haaland said, "Who the F are you?" last time they played each other. And then at full time, Kendrick Lamar's humble plays through the stadium. I mean, at the same time, though, he was rarely involved in the game, and then still has this moment where he escapes one of the world's best centre-backs and scores an excellent header. Like, Erling Haaland, man, what a guy. A disappointing result for Man City, obviously, but Arsenal charge on to try and knock Liverpool off that top spot. Do you know what? You can see where my allegiances lie. But, Dave, can we start with Wolves? And we'll come to Villa and the entire transfer picture and this game in a moment. But Wolves really deserve some credit for this performance and this result. They beat Aston Villa 2-0 at Molineux, which seems to be a common thing these days. Villa cannot win at Molineux. They're terrible at it. And actually, it was a much more encouraging performance from Wolves. I think we saw a bit of a new manager bounce when Vitor Pereira took over. Then that went a bit stale, and they've looked a bit more in that relegation form that we kind of saw earlier in the season. And then they pull out a performance like this against the Champions League side. So an excellent win for Wolves, wasn't it, Dave?
Oh, yeah, such a timely one as well, because they've endured a bit of a poor run of form of late. Yeah, it's one that I think Villa probably would have worried a little bit going into this game, because I think they're obviously post Champions League games that obviously you look at this season. I'd love to know the stats of how many games you've actually won after European games, because it's got to be. Is that it?
Yeah, it was against Wolves. It was against Wolves after playing young boys.
Yeah, they must. It must. It's definitely a hoodoo of sorts for them at the minute, and you've got to wonder like what it is. Like, is it just fatigue? Is it a lack of match preparation time? But you've got to give Wolves a lot of credit. I think particularly some of their play. I think Andre in this game, thought he did really well in that midfield battle. Really disrupted the flow of Villa at times. But you mentioned there, I think you've got to give their defence some due there, because, like we say, they've really struggled to stop the leak of goals the last few weeks. So I think the main one for me is Mateus Cunha, since he's come back. He was always going to be the one, isn't he? And we've
Yeah.
been questioning it, haven't we, over the last few weeks, whether he's been linked to quite a few different clubs, whether he's going to be allowed to leave in the January transfer window. And it now looks apparent that there's some sort of agreement there for him to leave at a certain price in the summer. But I think he took his goal extremely well. You might question whether there was a foul in there on a Villa player earlier on in that move, but it was a thorn in Villa's side, I thought, all game, and probably a sort of player that you probably lack at the moment. Maybe you might not now, but
Yeah, we'll come to that. Yeah, we were linked with Cunha actually, and
yeah.
I think his form had kind of dropped a little bit. Obviously, he had the suspension, and then when he came back, he struggled to kind of get back to that form. You could tell that constant talk over his future must have been a bit unsettling, and he settled that for Wolves fans, scored the goal, let them know he was staying and that he'd signed the new deal, and then that was announced shortly after the game, which I think will excite Wolves fans because there is a protection in there. He's got a long-term contract. The release clause, I think, is set at 65 million, which is a good fee, even if they do have to move him on. But they'll be hoping that they can keep him. He seems to be enjoying his football there. I think this win, given the fact that Leicester lost and Ipswich lost, gives them a bit of breathing space as well, which they'll be encouraged by. And I think, like you say, although you obviously want to look at Cunha and how he's leading the attack, the organisation of Wolves as a whole in this game was so much stronger. The defensive structure was really hard for Villa to break down at times, and they kind of held firm throughout. The wing backs tucked in when they needed to and really helped solidify that back line. I thought Tati was excellent as well. It was really difficult for Villa to get much joy out of them. And Wolves have shipped, 54 goals this season? So this was a really impressive clean sheet for them to grab as well. I think this is something that they'll use as a bit of a platform. And I think having that certainty over Cunha in particular probably helps them feel that they can move on with the rest of their season now. New manager, a settled squad. They're probably a bit frustrated that they've missed out on Kevin Danso to kind of reinforce the back line in the way that they thought they were going to. It'd be interesting to see whether they dip further into the market on deadline day. But for now, a great result for Wolves. Speaking of deadline day activity, should we talk about Villa? I think this game, you're right, they lacked a lot going forwards. They seemed to really struggle with the fatigue, and they needed some depth in the squad and some extra options. I mean, they made 4 changes at half-time, which I think tells you everything you need to know about how Emery was viewing the game. And they tried to get back into it in the second half. I still can't tell you really why Donyell Marlin's first Villa goal was disallowed. It was an absolutely ridiculous decision. I think the supposed foul on Rodgers in the build-up to Cunha's, I'm not really having that. He won the ball first. He made a bit of contact with him afterwards. I think it was okay, really. I'm not going to argue with that one. And Villa did not deserve anything out of this game. They were terrible. But they've acted quickly, it's safe to say, to get some stuff done. So let's unpick the week that Aston Villa have just had, Dave. So since we last spoke, they qualified for the round of 16 in the Champions League through the top 8 of the group stage. An incredible achievement with my favourite game I've watched Villa play in a really long time, the 4-2 win over Celtic. That was incredible. On that day, it became really clear that John Duran was leaving, as we kind of thought might happen at some point, but that moved really quickly. Al Nassr snapped him up. We reckon 65 million rising to 80. It's a lot of money. There was also a bid for Ollie Watkins. I mean, you talked about Arsenal wanting a striker. Well, they came in and tried to get their man, supposedly, from Aston Villa. Nonsense, if you ask me. They knew exactly what they were doing there. Villa are never selling him, and definitely not selling him when you've just accepted big money for Duran. That was definitely a bid to appease some fans. And Watkins, I'm confident he's not going anywhere, particularly this month. And then this week, Dave, they've been trying to get Axel Disasi over the line, but Chelsea have said they don't want to sell to a direct Champions League rival, so they're happy for him to go to Spurs, which I think is very funny. And then they've brought in the Marcus Rashford and Marco Asensio. If you told me, Dave, 5 years ago that you and I would be sat here having a conversation about how Villa can't sign players from direct Champions League rivals, but have managed to get Marcus Rashford out of a relegation battle with Man United to bring him into Villa and have signed Champions League winning Marco Asensio from PSG, I think I would have laughed in your face, but that is the reality in the world we live in now, Dave. Let's start with Rashford. You and Mike have had your say a few times on the impact he was having at Man United and how you felt his time at the club had come to an end. Can we talk about what he will bring to this Aston Villa side? Because we can't ignore that at his best, Marcus Rashford is one of the most dangerous attacking forwards in the league. Can he get back to that at Villa? And if he does, what does he do for this Unai Emery team?
I think it's a fascinating one. Like, if it's crazy, really, how it all came out. And I think you were probably as surprised as anybody that it was happening. There were a few murmurs, wasn't there, early on? I think David Ornstein released something saying Villa emerging as one of the front runners, but obviously there was nothing concrete at that time, and it all happened really quickly after that. To be honest, in a matter of hours, it felt like. But yeah, it's, you know what, I'm more confident that he'll do better for you than Asensio, if I'm being honest. I think Rashford, he's probably going to look at his long-term plan, and that could involve Villa. We don't know. For the time being, it's obviously this 6 months until the end of the season. But he's got that platform now to perform, and obviously play in the Champions League as well again, which will be, you know, a massive thing for him. But I just think he'll bring a lot to this Villa team. And I mentioned last year, I think, especially off that left-hand side, which you don't always set up perfectly to play in that way. But I think he will give you a different dimension in that sense of things. Running in behind, which we've seen your team look extremely dangerous in those situations. The likes of Watkins is able to do it. You know, Leon Bailey in the past. Yeah. Who knows whether he can obviously return to his rich vein of form, but I think he'll give you a lot. I just think this new environment should really spur him on, and actually, if he does, because there were rumours that he was waiting for Barcelona. If that is the case, and they were saying that they'll potentially look at it signing permanently in the summer, there's no better stage really for him to perform and really convince these teams to come in for in the summer. But I think it's a great signing for you. I think it will definitely give that squad a lift, because the amount of players that you hear come out and say, I've seen a lot of interviews with United players say who's the most talented player in your squad. A lot of them say Rashford. Yeah. But I just feel as though it's probably the right moment for him to seek pastures new. We've been saying that for the last couple of years now, haven't we? And in a way, it saddens me to say this as a United fan, because it just feels as though our environment at the club at the minute, on the training ground, probably not the best place for him to be. And we've said that a lot about a lot of players, that there's probably there's been a lack of professionalism at the club. You won't get that in a Unai Emery environment, and he won't allow it to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, isn't it, Dave? All the criticism that's been levelled at Rashford and his mentality, or has he put enough effort in at Man United? How many players have over the last 3 years at Man United? How many other players could you level that exact same thing at? Is this a Marcus Rashford problem? And I'm not convinced it is. I go really back and forth over it. When I first heard the rumour, I just thought it was nonsense. I didn't think we'd ever be in for someone like Rashford. The wages alone, I thought, were ridiculous, and it seemed unfeasible. But the more I kind of think about it, if it works out in the way Emery wants it to, which I back him to make it work, I think he's the best manager Rashford will have ever worked under, bar Mourinho, and even then, given where they are in their careers, probably still, right? And I think if anyone's going to get Marcus Rashford back firing, this is the right club for it, because Villa are really good at transitioning the ball up the pitch quickly, something that really suits Rashford. They have someone like Tielemans who can unlock runs from deep and is one of the most creative players in the league this season. And we've talked about quite a lot on this podcast how Villa lack a left winger and a left forward. They play Ramsey there sometimes, but he's not really a winger. Sometimes Rodgers drifts out there, but he likes to say central. And then you're relying on it being either Luca Dean or Ian Maatsen. So there's a space there that makes perfect sense for someone like Rashford. Plus, he has the versatility to play pretty much anywhere across the front three. And we've just sold Duran. So profile-wise, it's perfect. It's someone with Champions League experience, something that the squad really lacks, and lightning pace. And we really want to see more of that in this attacking team. So if it works out, it's great. And you talk about, well, this is the perfect platform platform for him to get a move in the summer. I think that was the thing that bothered me if it had been just a loan deal. But the fact that there is an option to buy makes this seem like a much better deal to me. If it had just been, look, we'll hold on to him for 6 months and see what happens, I wouldn't have been that keen on that.
Do you know what that I didn't like all the talk about Barcelona and that, because it just we spoke about it, didn't we, on the chat? In the week, and we just said, like, I just find it ridiculous. Like, that is not the right move for him. This is a perfect opportunity now for him to return to form and actually throw his hat back into the England, equation of him getting back into the team. And I just think it's a very good move, and one that, to be honest, I'm surprised. And I actually respect him a little bit more for it, because he's actually now showing that. I think he's definitely been upset with a lot of what's been said about him,
of course,
and wants to obviously prove his credibility. I think as a player, I think we know on his day he's capable of like world class moments, and that's the thing now. I think he's just got to make that jump from being a moments player to be consistent. What last season we saw, obviously, the season before last with Ten Hag. Where he looked like he was finally cementing his status of one of the world's best forwards. And we know he's capable of doing that. It's just doing it on a consistent basis.
He's only 27. I think because he came in so young, it's easy to forget that he really should be in the prime of his career right now. I just hope that the move to another English club doesn't make it more difficult for him. Like Mike said in the chat that he thought that it was more likely that Rashford would go abroad and that would suit him. Because the British press, they love to try and pick Rashford apart. I've already seen so many ridiculous stories about him today, and like, let's analyse the fall of Marcus Rashford, and like, how has it gone wrong for the Man United former star and things like that. He will be under a lot of scrutiny because the eyes are all on him now. And now he's gone into Aston Villa. He'll be their highest earner, and the pressure is on. He's at a Champions League club now. He has to perform for the money that is being paid towards him. I hope that he lives up to that and it's not too much for him still.
Do you think you have to change your team a little bit to accommodate him in terms of, I think, your midfield, potentially who's going to start on the right-hand side if we assume is going to be starting off the left of Ollie Watkins?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if it means that McGinn plays back on the right again and Bailey drops out for a while, because Bailey... I love Leon Bailey, but he's had a very, very poor season. There was actually talk that Man United were looking at him over the last couple of days, and the same for Spurs. And I wouldn't have been heartbroken at a move, I'll be totally honest. But we'll see what that means for him. I mean, Asensio, you'd imagine he's going to play that right-hand role as well. At some time, we'll come to him in a second. And he won't necessarily be bombing on past fullbacks, and instead likes to control play from deeper positions. I think it probably means that Tielemans sits a little bit deeper to facilitate having Rodgers. So you're probably looking at a midfield pivot of Tielemans and Kamara, or Tielemans and Onana with Kamara at the back. There's definitely players there. But the thing is, it's options. And that's what Villa needed. I'm just surprised that all of the options are attacking players. Like, obviously, we are desperate for a centre-back. We are so... Kamara showed against Wolves, he's not a centre-back. He really struggled in that position. As he's an excellent footballer. He has great defensive capabilities. I think I said last week, give him a go there. Yeah, I saw it. I wasn't happy with it. And I hope that before the window closes, we do something there. But I think you can make adjustments to facilitate a player like Rashford if he is playing at the top of his game. Just quickly, Dave, along with that, because I don't want to... I know we've been talking about Villa for a while now, but 3-time Champions League winner, Marco Asensio. Is that why he's there? Is he there because obviously Emery will rate him and he's wanted him for a while? There was talk in the summer that we were looking at him, and the year before when he went to PSG, Villa were supposedly linked with him. I think Monchi obviously thinks really highly of him. And again, European pedigree, and Villa are now deeper in European competition. There's no option to buy on this one. It's just a straight loan. I think we're covering his whole salary, which is going to be a lot of money. What do you think? Good move?
I think it could be. I think, particularly this season, I think your right-hand side has been nullified quite a lot in games. And I think a lot of that's come down to, like you say, Leon Bailey's form. He's not quite been the player that he was at times last season. And I think he'll definitely just bring you a little more quality on that right-hand side. I think there's no doubt in his ability. We know how good he can be on the ball. This is a player who we thought was going to be an absolute superstar, and obviously had that awful injury, didn't he? at Real Madrid, which really kind of curtailed his sort of early career, and didn't quite materialise how we thought it was going to. But I think this again, it's a good move for him, and it's as a manager that knows him, will know him well and know what he can offer to this team. And I think one thing that Emery does is, you look at a lot of his acquisitions, he's not got many wrong at all, if we're being honest.
No.
Probably Diego Carlos.
He didn't bring him in. That was Gerrard. I'll give him a break on that. You say that, Dave. So I saw something the other day about Emery's acquisitions, and actually, it's not a lot that are still in the team because really, Diaby went, Zaniolo didn't work out. I mean, Duran's gone. The only ones that really are still around.
You can't say that they didn't. Yeah, you can't say that they didn't do well in the Villa shirt. No, that's the thing.
True.
They can't say that they didn't perform, because every one of those players had an impact on the game that they played in at times. Probably Zaniolo to less of it. But I think the likes of Diaby, I thought he looked like a real player at times in a Villa shirt.
Yeah.
But you can see that. I just think what is piecing together now in Emery, I think definitely it's really exciting to see, and one that I can't imagine a lot of Villa fans would have imagined seeing some of these players in a Villa shirt 18 months ago.
It's definitely true. I think we have to move on, because I can hear Forest fans screaming at me that they scored 7 goals and got 8 minutes, so we've probably been talking about Villa for 15 now. So after they lost. So let's move on. A couple of other results, Dave, that I just kind of wanted to mention. Everton under David Moyes, brand new side. Not only are they winning games, 4 goals. I know Leicester, all right, Leicester are Leicester at the moment, but a 4-0 win for Everton, Dave. What does this mean for David Moyes in terms of the relegation picture? Are we confident that Everton are just out of that race now? I
think so. I mean, it looks like a relegation battle between four teams. Could be 5, to see how United go over the next few weeks. But yeah, I just think he's done really well since he's come in, hasn't he? And I think if you look at some of the players, their reaction to him coming in, the likes of Beto today, I thought took his goals really well, and I think that will do him the world of confidence, because this is a team that are really struggling to score for a long period of the first half of the season, and all of a sudden they look like they carry quite a lot of threat going forward. The likes of Decore obviously scored his first goal, didn't he, this season as well. We've seen him, chip in with goals over the last few years. I thought James Garner was outstanding in this game.
Yeah,
that through ball
was lovely.
That is one of the passes of the season. Perfectly weighted.
Yeah.
So I think there's it's definitely a time that it's becoming a little bit easier for Everton fans. Definitely for the time being, anyway. And just be interesting to see how they carry on now, and they can take this momentum. There's no reason why they can't work their way up back into mid-table, perhaps even to the top half.
And their next game is Merseyside derby, last one at Goodison Park. So that's going to be an interesting fixture, isn't it? Fulham, Dave, they had a great weekend. Their weekend is probably the best out there. Sorry, Forest fans, but they beat Newcastle away from home 2-1. And now are 5 points off 4th, because City dropped points, Newcastle dropped points, Bournemouth lost, Villa lost. So all the teams above them, Chelsea yet to play, fair. But what a result that is for Fulham. 2-1 at Newcastle. You see that one coming?
No, but Fulham, like we're saying, you don't know what to expect from them at times this season. They've obviously, we mentioned about their squad and how good it is in certain areas. But I think Marcus Silva, the job that he's done is so underrated. I just think he's done such a good job with that squad. The likes of obviously Raul Jimenez come in and showing his old form that he had. And I think definitely rotating those 2 strikers, because Muniz, like we mentioned at the end of last season, looked like it was his position for the taking. But I think just to create that kind of competition between those players and make them really want to perform, and I just think it's another great result at one, like you mentioned. Newcastle, we said last week, didn't we? I said to you, and I've definitely jinxed it. I'm sorry, Newcastle fans, but I said I feel like top 4 is Newcastle for the taking with some of the results they've had over the last few weeks. But yeah,
It's someone's for the taking. It definitely is. You're just waiting for one team between like 4th and 10th to just go on a run and cement it, because they just keep being inconsistent and dropping points at random times. The only exception to that really being Bournemouth. I mean, they lost at the weekend, but it was a harsh loss. They lost 2-0 to Liverpool. Let's say, look, I feel a bit bad here because obviously it's going to sound biased coming from us because we're not the biggest fans of Liverpool, and they are having a sensational season, and we rarely talk about them, even though they're top of the league. I'm now going to mention them and talk about how they benefited from a controversial penalty, to say the least.
Yeah.
Alexis McAllister, I don't know how he didn't get sent off. Bournemouth probably should have had a penalty as well. It could have been a really different game. I mean, Alisson was probably the shining light for Liverpool alongside Salah again. The midfield is looking a bit stronger for Liverpool.
Bournemouth should have just saved some of the saved some of the goals from the previous week, basically.
Cliver definitely should, with that one he missed. That was shocking. So unfortunate for Bournemouth, who obviously we've taken a bit of a shine into. We can see them flying up the league. Drop points in this one, and Liverpool continue to run away with it. We kind of expect them to win. Just to wrap up the rest, disappointing result for Ipswich, but Southampton are edging ever closer to avoiding that unwanted record. That's a bad result, Dave. That, if anything, spelled out the fact that Ipswich will probably be going down this season.
Kieran McKenna must have been fuming because that is the one you absolutely have to be winning, isn't it?
Yeah. Not beating Southampton at home is criminal. We should relegate him just for that. But Urich should be over the moon with that. Another team in the relegation battle that managed to get some points on the board. Tottenham beat Brentford 2-0 away from home. They're having a really weird couple of days. Just to finish off some transfer chat then. They have signed Kevin Danso, who it looked like was pretty set for a move to Wolves. Then there's been the saga of Matthias Tell, who has been linked with every man and their dog over the last few days. Apparently, Daniel Levy flew out to Munich to try and convince him to come to Spurs, and he said, "Thank you, no thank you, I'm not coming to you." Then United seemed to agree a deal with him, and then all of a sudden that fell through, and now he is going to Spurs again after links to Chelsea, Arsenal, Villa, who knows. Spurs have got 2 players through the door, surprisingly. They also put in, apparently, I don't know how much I believe this. Apparently, they put in a 70 million bid for Mark Gahey today. Now, that screams again of what we talked about with Watkins, of an owner that's going, look, I am doing something, knowing it's going to get rejected, so it's easy to do it. I wish they had to pay a portion of the fee just to make the bid, just to prove a point. But they did get a 2-0 win over Brentford, Dave, something that they really needed, and they've now won 2 games in a row going into that crucial semi-final and playing Villa in the FA Cup at the weekend. So big week ahead for Spurs. One more result we've not talked about, Dave. Sorry, mate.
No, can't think of any.
Well, Crystal Palace. We were worried about them at the start of the season a little bit. Things looked a bit stale under Glasner after such an excellent end to last season. Well, it's safe to say they are back in some form now. They leapfrogged their opponents at the weekend and are now in 12th. I haven't mentioned them still. I'm going to try and hold off for a little bit longer. They have an incredible record over the last few years at said ground that they visited over the weekend, Dave.
Don't know
to Manchester United.
I think most teams have got a good record at Old Trafford.
What's going on there, mate? I mean, let's give Palace just a bit of credit before you cry a bit further. Jean-Philippe Mateta, back amongst the goals again, looks like such a potent attacking force once again with Sarr and him. They look so dynamic. And it's been a weird window for Palace. Obviously, Chalobah got recalled. It now looks like they've signed Ben Chilwell on loan. I don't know what I make of that signing, to be honest, because we know he can be an excellent fullback, but who knows what kind of player he is now. And I love Tyreek Mitchell, so I don't really get that one so much. But all in all, Palace up to 12th. And all of a sudden, they're only 4 points off Brighton. So pretty good turnaround for them, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah, I think particularly, since the start of the season, they had obviously a very slow start, and we were quite worried for Glasner, weren't we, at one point? I think a lot of their players, the likes obviously you mentioned Mateta there, who had a very slow start of the season, and all of a sudden he's found his scoring boots now, and really did a number on United. I think you can see that they take a lot of time in the preparation to games. I think he listened to some of the comments after the game. They knew what United's game plan was. They knew how they were going to approach the match, and they really kind of took us apart at times in certain moments. You could see we were vulnerable in certain situations, definitely at set pieces, which, they a lot of teams along with them have taken advantage of that over the last few months. And they look comfortable, for being honest. I think there was a period at the start of the game, first 15, 20 minutes, where we did look quite dangerous, but they rode that and really probably deserved to win. I think they had the better of the game.
Absolutely. In terms of United, Dave, obviously, like we said, missing out on Mateus Tell. Lissandro Martinez now is reported that he's done his ACL, so will be out for the season. That's a really frustrating blow. And yeah, it's... I just don't know what the plan is here, mate, to be honest. What's going on?
I think the season's...
I'm reading nothing else in January as well. Yeah.
The season's done. They've obviously got the Europa League, and you're kind of banking on Højlund's goal-scoring form in the Europa League to continue, because obviously he's top scorer and he scored, I think he was a top scorer, wasn't he, until the last game week, I think, of the Europa League. I think he's, doing really well, but we just can't put the ball in the back of the net, can we? Really struggling.
It's crazy.
And the fact that we're now obviously only have 4 attackers is a little bit worrying. It only takes Ahmad or Garnacho to get an injury, and then all of a sudden we're probably looking at potentially promoting one of the under 18s or under 21s, and that shouldn't be in a situation. Well, this is all a result of our awful financial situation and some of the terrible decision making the club's made over the last 5 years, and it's all come to a head. I don't want to mention anymore because it's just boring, isn't it?
No, fair enough. Is there any other transfer news that's kind of caught your eye over the last couple of days?
There's not been a great deal, has there? I think Evan Ferguson could do a great job at West Ham.
He needs to refine his form, doesn't he?
I think Paul Crook, obviously, he's had a couple of injuries while he's been there. So I think for him to come in there, obviously they eyed up John Duran again, didn't they? And didn't quite get their man. But I think that could be a really good move for him. And he's just struggled for minutes, hasn't he? Over probably, the last year. Had a blistering start to life at Brighton. But I'm eager to see him. I'm eager to see him back playing football, and I think we can play minutes, week in, week out.
Yeah, Potter clearly trusts him. And Man City have signed Nico Gonzalez today. Means that they've spent 210 million in January. What's that? What I'm trying to work out the math. 95 million more than the amount of charges. Is that something like that? Is that the plan?
I think it is. Every time Man City have a crisis, they just go out and spend another 70 million on a player that they're really struggling. Like midfield, their midfield looks awful at the moment. So it doesn't surprise me that they've brought somebody in.
I'm baffled that it took them that long to sign a midfielder, but it's done now. So we will talk again next week, Dave.
FA Cup.
By then the window will be done. The FA Cup will continue. The Carabao Cup semi-finals as well. It's a big week this week.
A round that Villa very rarely see as well. Normally out by now, aren't you?
I know. And typically we've got Spurs, who seem to give everyone a free pass except for Villa these days. Although, another one for them, Dragusin, he's done his ACL as well. So it's another defender out. But apparently Van de Ven and Romero will be back soon, and they're clearly active in the market. So we'll see. Maybe it's the Axel Disasi derby. Whoever wins can have him on loan. That should be the deal I reckon they make. In the meantime, guys, thank you for joining us this week. As always, please head to our socials. We're on Blue Sky. You can find us there. And subscribe to the YouTube channel. Obviously, that's our biggest platform. We really appreciate your support on there. We love hearing from you as well. So get yourself in the comments. It's good to talk to you guys about your takes on the week's events. And we're on all streaming platforms as well for you to listen to the audio version of this. I'm sure Mike will be back with us next week. I think he's just crying over the lost love that is Marcus Rashford for you boys. So we'll look after him for you. And in the meantime, guys, thanks for joining the Football Diary podcast. It's been a pleasure.
See you next time.